Welcome to the Newburyport Literary Festival. We've scheduled 2 full days of terrific events. Be sure to check the complete schedule on the Newburyport Literary Festival website. My name is Alfred Nicole, and I'll be your host for this morning's poetry event. We are using Zoom webinar, which means that you can see us, me at this moment, but we can't see you. So we encourage you to use the chat window throughout the event. And besides that, it creates a little buzz, and that's a good thing, especially since you can't hear the buzz. So it doesn't interrupt anybody. One important note before we get started, our local bookstores need your support now more than ever. I have already posted a link in the chat session to 2 of our festival partners, Jabberwocky Bookshop in Newburyport and the Bookshop of Beverly Farms. We encourage you to purchase books from them unless, of course, you have your own favorite independent bookstore that you'd like to support. Now I will introduce our first reader. No less an authority than X.J. Kennedy had this to say about the poetry of Mitch Goldberg. Every poem of Midge Goldberg's, when read aloud, sounds convincingly like speech from a human mouth. That observation goes straight to the heart of Goldberg's art, which does not occupy some rarefied realm inaccessible to the uninitiated. She keeps it real. People recognize their own lives in her poems, written in the language they would use to speak about their own lives. It's not as though there's no artifice involved. First of all, people often have great difficulty finding words to express themselves. And those words don't accidentally fall into lines of iambic pentameter. Sonnets and villanelles don't tumble out of people's mouths. But Goldberg's uncanny ability to channel the inner life of every woman goes deeper than a gift for versifying ordinary diction. She recognizes how little authority most of us can muster when talking about our inner lives. We're riddled with doubt. We question everything we've done. We ask ourselves what ought to be done. We wonder what people will think, even people who are no longer with us. I found that ghosts can be the toughest critics, says one of Goldberg's personae. One might identify a poem by Midge Goldberg judging just by how many question marks are in it. There are questions that arise from curiosity. One poem asks in good faith how the Mormon tradition of serving potatoes got its start. In another, the poet watches tourists disembark from a whale watch boat and wants desperately to stop someone and ask, just tell me, did you see a whale or not? Other questions in Goldberg's poems arise from fear, worry, a sense of inadequacy. Getting a busy signal, she asks, who is on the other line? He might prefer to me. His mother, sister, college friend, that girl on speed dial 3? There are questions born of tattoo regret. Can I unpierce my skin? And questions of an existential nature. Can you say with certainty that you exist? Goldberg perceives the human condition as one long, sleepless night. There's no getting away from it. We even second guess our own escapist fantasies. Who else but Midge Goldberg could have written the poem titled North by Northeast, in which a daydream of Cary Grant coming to visit the poet in New Hampshire falls apart under a flurry of questions? Oh, come to New Hampshire, my dear Cary Grant, she begins. But soon enough, she wonders, how are you, Cary, with chickens and chores? I know you do rooftops, but do you do floors? What about wood stoves and maples to tap, sump pumps and snow plows and boiling the sap? And then, of course, there are questions born of sheer wonder. Upon seeing a field of flowers, she asks, has the farmer gone completely mad, planting a field of flowers just for beauty's sake? Or the ritual question repeated at Passover, how is this night different from all other nights? Mitch Goldberg's poetry, both her light verse and the darker stuff, taps into our common experience by asking the endlessly wide range of questions we ask ourselves. Reading her is like looking up at the night sky and being reminded that we're surrounded by mysteries. Mitch, I'm going to make myself disappear, and you take it from here.
Well, thank you very much, Alfred. I even forgot some of those poems, and I feel like reading her makes you just worry like about 10 times more than you ordinarily would worry. But thank you very much for inviting me. It's kind of, in the face of that intro, it's kind of hilarious that I didn't even realize this, to what extent this happened in my own poetry. I thought, oh, that's cute. Sure, I can think of a poem or two. I'll go and look through my poems and see if maybe the theme will be, let me see if I have any with questions in it. And then like every single one I opened had a question. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, good job, Alfred, good theme. So, nagging questions. I'm gonna start with a poem that really is the epitome of this theme. It's called Gift Horse. Cassandra, yes, you had it bad. You spoke, they wouldn't listen. Sad. But face it, most days back in Troy, there was no tragic Grecian ploy. How often was there news so dire that made you preach without a choir? Really, worse than prophecy is seeing possibility. What if this, or why not that? Each day requires a caveat, or two, or three, a hydra's head that multiplies on going to bed. Whenever there's a choice of curse, to wonder, not to know, is worse. You really are the lucky one, knowing all things under the sun, not always asking of the sky, what if, why not, why? So really, I should just stop. I mean, that's just it. What else can you ask? But okay, I have a few more minutes to fill up, so I'll go on. I started a mini project where I was writing poems about women in the Bible who don't have names. So, and of course, this poem is just rife with nagging questions. This poem is called Pharaoh's Daughter, and there's an epigraph. Pharaoh's daughter made him her son. She named him Moses, explaining, I drew him out of the water. Pharaoh's daughter. Really? I find a baby in the water? I've got to know my father's killing Jews. And then some girl appears, dutiful daughter, loving sister, there with helpful news. She might just know a wet nurse for the baby. What am I? Awkward plot device? Convenient miracle? Much later, they say, maybe it was an act of faith, and they are lenient. Marry me off, give me a name. Fuck you, Batya, daughter of God. I was his mother, skinned knees, homework, and then one day he knew and left behind our life to lead another. I always had a future and a past. It's only God who made me seem half-assed. This poem, there might not be literal questions, but the every let's say is really just a what if in disguise. The poem is called Smart Tales, like smartphone. Smart Tales, Red Riding Hood. Let's say that you're partial to hoods and you're off to bring grandma the goods. Those teeth are a hint, be ready to sprint. Verizon's one bar in these woods. Cinderella. Let's say that you have a new dress and your boyfriend is anyone's guess. Go enjoy being posh, just as long as your squash has a clock and a good GPS. Snow White. It's not smart when you're home all alone, though an apple is fine for a phone, to take fruit that looks sweet from a crone that you meet while a battle is on for the throne. Sleeping Beauty. Let's say that you're stuck in a castle, in a spell that is really quite facile. Why fight the unseen? Can you kiss through a screen? Use Zoom and avoid all the hassle. The Beast talks to Beauty. Are you sick of being seen as a cutie, though you've brains and a strong sense of duty? While my looks tend to hinder my chances on Tinder, swipe right to see my inner beauty. Alfred referred to this one, as if there weren't enough to worry about, then technology comes in and gives us a whole new set of things to worry about. This is called busy signal. No busy signal on his cell. Instead, I'm on call waiting. I can't hang up the phone, and so I'm left anticipating whether he sees my name, whether when he sees my name, he'll want to take the call. And if he doesn't, am I on his contact list at all? Or am I still a nameless number in this three-way hell? Will he know it's me or think, that doesn't ring a bell? And who is on the other line he might prefer to me? His mother, sister, college friend, that girl on speed dial 3. But if I choose to end it, then missed call gives me away. No anonymity will hide the things I didn't say. Times have changed. These days there are no hangups anymore. I'm strong enough, so go ahead, accept or else ignore. I do want to give a shout out to Light and Melissa Balmain, where a lot of these poems appeared. It's a great place, a great outlet for my endlessly hilarious questioning. Alfred also referred to this poem. So I have some friends from Utah who first introduced me to this, and then my son went to college there for a while. So I learned about this very uniquely named dish, which of course I had to write a poem about. The poem is called Funeral Potatoes, and that is the name of the dish, funeral potatoes. Funeral potatoes. A Mormon dish called funeral potatoes, ubiquitous and creamy, full of cheese, appears at every family funeral. No Mormon dies without a side of these. They fill a spot on all the mourners' plates, next to the slaws and casseroles and meat. And as the dead approach the pearly gates, the living do their part. They sit and eat. My question on this lumpy sustenance, how did it start? As food or something more? A humble symbol, earthly, blind, and dense, a Mormon's not so gourmet metaphor. Or maybe it's that any time of year, potatoes are just what there was at hand, rattling around a farmhouse bin somewhere, or scrabbled from the dusty promised land. And just by dint of sheer dull repetition, a funeral a month for years on end, potatoes gained this deathly reputation. What started as a meal became a trend. Regardless, here they are, loaded with meaning. Someone you love just died. To make it through, maybe a potato's what you need to serve as comfort when no words will do. So this is a little break from humor into nonsense. If you saw last night's opening interview with Deborah Warren, fabulous, so happy, thrilled that she was recognized like that. This is a little homage to some of her poems, her lines, whether they're in poems or just muttered under her breath, as I got lucky enough to sit next to her and overhear her. And it even refers to the poem she read last night about the mole digging through air. This is called Warrens for Deborah Warren. You haven't seen the last of all my monkeys. I've got no parrots running in this race. A horse would never go to tea with donkeys. The zebra disappeared without a trace. The opera singer serenades the clay. The monkeys were last seen in Monaco. The velvet bustier seems déclassé. The stove will only work in months with O. And yet I dig through air to unearth moons. Tomato seedlings dream that they can crawl. The monkeys hand down antique family spoons. A stove is out there waiting for us all. The monkeys last much longer than you see. The monkeys haven't seen the last of me. And if that makes no sense, yeah, well, if it makes no sense, what you should do is you should buy Deborah Warren's books, because these are referenced to all her poems, and the poems themselves are way better. Okay, so this is either it's a parody or it's not a parody. I guess I don't know what exactly the definition of parody is, but the last line is completely stolen from one of my favorite poets, Edna St. Vincent Millay. So just imagine her standing up here, talking to the audience, I guess mostly the men, and just see how we arrive at her last line. Edna St. Vincent Millay on wearing her first bikini. Breasts are just breasts, you guys, like feet or ears, a pair you're born with. Well, okay, this pair appears later, not all that useful till we need them, when babies come along and we can feed them. Otherwise, they're more like lottery tickets. This one gets flat, that one gets house of brick. It's just like you, with parts that vary in size, but out of sight where we can't scrutinize. We shouldn't let it be the start of wars. It's out of our control, but out of yours, I guess. A quick reaction you can't stifle when on a beach you're greeted with an eyeful. But size, just keep in mind while you are peaking, is idle, biologically speaking. Here's the tattoo poem Alfred referred to, Tattoo Regret. You got to wonder, you see people with someone's name on there, what happens after the relationship? Tattoo regret. The thrumming in my head becomes a piercing din. I kicked him out of bed. Can I unprick my skin? And another that just jumps right in, starting with a question. The perks. Why is Satan not too hot in hell? I'm very, very sorry. 1 second, please.
The demon didn't want to hear this one.
Absolutely not. Okay, sorry. I'll start again. The perks. Why is Satan not too hot in hell? He doesn't seem to suffer like the rest who languish there. You'd almost say he's blessed. He's acclimated to the place so well. Perhaps he has a fast metabolism, but he can't be impervious to heat. That would be kind of silly and defeat the purpose of this weather-changing schism. No, there's a different way he disobeys. An air-conditioned office where he stays. A well-stocked mini-fridge that would entice God himself. Cold beer and oh, the ice. To his chagrin, he cannot let God know. From time to time, he mops his brow for show. So I used to, as you'll hear, I'm married to the poet Robert Crawford, who is appearing this afternoon. I encourage you to tune into that. And I used to wonder what it would be like if we had met when we were younger, like in college. I mean, I'm quite sure that he would have ignored me and I would have hated him. But but I went with this idea of like, what would it have been like if we had met them? And that's where this poem came from. It's called Time Travel Airlines. Welcome aboard. Excuse me. Welcome aboard. Please take a seat. On flight, wish I had known you when. You're going back in time to meet your spouse you didn't know back then. A question first, before the flight. When and where will your mate be? A real event, try as we might, we can't rewrite all history. Now, choose your age. The basic rate sends you as you are presently. Or change your age. You two can date for just a minor upgrade fee. Cocktails are being served that ease the memory of what awaits. No diapers, weight gain, fights, disease. Those put a pall on most first dates. There are no long-term side effects. No matter what, you two still wed. You might get lucky, might have sex. Your spouse might hate your guts instead. He or she won't have a clue of who's inside that youthful skin. That knowledge will come back with you. You'll know what is, might not have been. It takes one kind of faith to go, another kind of faith to stay. So buckle up, enjoy the show, or take the exit right this way. Okay, now if I were in a real reading, this would be the moment where I would look out at the audience and say, okay, raise your hands, anyone here who doesn't know Gilligan's Island and Ginger and Mary Ann. So, I mean, anybody? But in this case, I can just say, you know what, if you don't know it, Google it while I'm reading, because it'll make a lot more sense. This is called Party Games, circa 1974. Do you remember Truth or Dare? We feared them both. One question, Ginger or Mary Ann? The uncouth guys picked Ginger, and we sneered, we girls, we Mary Anns. Act helpless, coy, all in an evening gown? But if some boy said, Mary Ann, we looked at him askance. Was he a liar or more truthful than the rest? So grab him as our only chance. Our turn. Who would we be? Our sure retort, we hung on tight to Mary Ann, the life preserver, virgin picnic planner wife, longing to let the ginger out, cavort the chosen one, with all we called uncouth, except the dare for once, and not the truth. The next few poems are about my family. This poem isn't so much a question, but actually the question that I got in return from an editor when I submitted it to a magazine, which I'll tell you about afterwards. Superhero. My son puts on his winter coat, the hood just covering his blonde, disheveled hair, with coat and coat sleeves flying out behind him, and races through the house, the yard transformed, the superhero of this close domain. He growls and roars, brandishes little fists in a victory stance above the dinner table. He builds an airplane out of kitchen chairs, inviting me to fly away with him and see the world, and still believes me when I whisper to him, broccoli makes you go higher. So the question after, like I said, I submitted this, I believe it was Yankee Magazine, and I got it back with a note on it that said, like, I don't understand the broccoli. I thought, okay. Okay, question. And it's also funny because this little superhero is graduating from college in a couple of weeks. So boy, how time flies along with him. Okay, the next one is, I find that, I guess I ask so many questions that I start blaming them on other people, pretending like it wasn't me asking them. This is called The Fish. But what about the fish? My daughter asks. We're reading, for a bedtime story, Noah, who's busy with at least 1 million tasks, preparing place for sheep, flamingo, boa. But there's no mention of the fish. I say, that's true. Of course, they wouldn't care about a flood. In fact, they'd have more room that way. But why did God decide to leave them out? Were they unsullied more than beast or bird? Forgotten? Was it too hard to make disaster really work for everyone? No word on this. They got no promises or master, nothing they did not need, no watery bow. Untouched by God, the fish stayed safe below. And now for my husband. This one's called Heading Out. I should stop kissing you goodbye. It's not a sign of love, but fear that while I'm out, you'll die. And then I think, what of? I worry most about disease, each week a different kind. Today I cannot find my keys. Alzheimer's comes to mind. That can't kick in, you kindly say, in the hours you'll be gone. So go, have fun, enjoy the day. I plan to mow the lawn. Mowing? Images fill my head, a stroke, a heart attack. You groan, I'm fine, and if I'm dead, no need to hurry back. Okay, I'm leaving, back at 4. I love you, you reply. How sweet, I think. Hand on the door. I should kiss you goodbye. Cloud 9. Cloud 9 is always touted Cloud 9 is always touted as the perfect place to be. But where's the place for things that are less than heavenly? The moderate joy of raisin bran, a morning's smooth commute. I'd only need cloud 2 or 3 for puppies that are cute. A 4 or 5 might do for coffee, books that I have read. Cloud 6 or 7's getting up there, college degrees, fresh bread. 8 for me would be the zenith. Babies, weddings too. That's the cloud I'd use to show the joy I feel with you. Not that you don't deserve a 9. It's just that in my way, I'd always keep 9 in reserve for some impossible day. And yet one day I'll take your hand, one moment close to death. I'll think there's nothing else and whisper 9 with my last breath. And I'm going to end with a one poem that is not a question, but something that I know. The language of love. I found not flowers or poetry this morning when I woke up, but coffee brewed and poured into my Wonder Woman cup. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. That was terrific. That was terrific. You should see, you have quite a gathering of poets in your audience. And Melissa, whom you already mentioned, as she said, you know, it's too bad you can't hear us laughing. And because we would have been laughing a lot, but it wasn't just funny though. And you gave us a break from humor by slipping into nonsense. Thank you so much. You were great. All right, our next poet is Chris O'Carroll. Nobody seems to know very much about Chris O'Carroll's real life. We only know him as one of the cleverest light verses alive. I'm told that he's also an actor and comedian, and I can tell you that those talents serve him very well when he's asked to read verse in a noisy bar room, where I've seen him captivate the audience while the rest of us poets might as well have been mimes at the microphone. He's got the daring of a comic showman. I'm reminded of how Charlie Chaplin forever risked losing his balance. The cardinal sin for a formalist poet would be to allow a line of verse to appear rhyme-driven, to write a line that serves no purpose in the poem other than to fulfill the rhyme requirement. But O'Carroll's poem, Ode to My Rhyming Diary, brazenly flaunts its rhyme-drivenness in every stanza and pulls it off brilliantly. Of course, he's a formidable formalist, as any legitimate light verser must be, but he doesn't stick to the reputable forms. He writes paracrostics as well as sestinas, limericks as well as villanelles. He's written a list poem / Shakespearean sonnet of New Year's predictions, all 100% accurate and renewable. And he's the author of my pick for the finest Clerihew ever written, a paired Clerihew actually, called Cosmology Clerihews. But what really sets O'Carroll apart is his gift for phrase making. Listen to the way he describes the music of New Orleans. Jazz, sacred syncopation both steeped in and transcending sin. Hell has no hotter sound, and heaven swings as the saints go marching in. Or listen to this, his reaction to a hug from his mother who is drifting into senility. You've lost your grip, but your embrace is strong. As that gorgeous line indicates, not all of O'Carroll's poetry is light verse. His unrhymed sonnet, July in Pennsylvania, begins with the phrase, "The mockingbirds at Gettysburg." It is an enviable phrase in itself with its heavy accents on the first of the 3 syllables in each of the nouns, but the best is yet to come when we arrive at the verb. The mockingbirds pry-bar their tails against the summer. The unexpected verb is both accurate, descriptive, and the gateway to a metaphor. Just watch what he does with the metaphor. Those tails turned pry-bars level at some insubstantial weight. The memories of war ride on the air, the poet tells us. The mockingbirds feel, as he does, the weight of history in this place. Here and nearly everywhere in his poetry, that gift for phrase making goes hand in hand with a gift for metaphor. Vultures are birds the color of dried blood. Conestoga wagon wheel ruts are ghost imprints on collective memory. His contemplation of quarks and the new physics even leads him to find a new metaphor for reality itself. Emptiness with a veneer on top. Chris Carroll writes clever, funny verse, but don't let him fool you. He's one serious poet, a master craftsman with such a wealth of wit, he'd have felt comfortable raising a glass at the Mermaid Tavern. Chris, you take it from here. Are you there?
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Alfred. And thank you all for being here, this international audience that has gathered today. And a special thanks to Midge Goldberg for being everything except an easy act to follow. Our theme today is nagging questions. So let's start with a poem that has a question for its title. How many poets does it take to screw in a light bulb? Eschew the headlong thrust, but choose the screw, that subtle swerve that Archimedes knew. Let there be light by means of deft rotation and delicately twisted penetration. So let's jump right into some delicate twisting. One of the premises I work from is that there is practically nothing in human experience that is beyond the reach of comedy. So to test that premise, here is a poem about death. Admittedly, that's a pretty abstract phrase, a poem about death. So to make it a little more concrete and specific, this is a poem about my death. Burn this poem. When I am dead, cremate me, but not a minute before. It's sure to irritate me if I hear the oven door clang shut while my lungs and heart yet cavort with blood and breath. I prefer the flames to start some interval after death. Pray, do not ash and urn me ere I join that unseen choir. After the fates adjourn me will be time enough for the fire. Sooner won't quite delight me. Quick flesh from the flames withhold. Take care not to ignite me till I'm well and truly cold. And I guess if death can be funny, so can its precursor. So here is Ode to Old Age. I walk into a room and suddenly I'm at a loss. What did I want in here? That puckish brain tweaker, reality, has learned to shift its shape or disappear. I used to have to smoke expensive weed to tune into this zoned out paradigm. Today, my skull packs all the buzz I need. I'm high on failing cells and passing time. Each friend or relative that I outlive is one less witness to my foolish youth. Now, any version of the past I give is more or less the undisputed truth. What names and numbers I may have forgotten are obligations I've been glad to shed. Untangled from the past I once was caught in, I rest in peace before I'm even dead. And maybe that's enough about death and dying for now. The other great subject of literature, they tell us, is love. So here's a poem inspired by a Robert Burns lyric that I'm sure everybody here is familiar with. Oh, my love is like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. My love is like the melody that's sweetly played in tune, yada, yada, yada. This is my take on that. My love is like a day in June. She makes me gleam with sweat. My love is like a tattoo all the rock stars want to get. My love is like a chocolate binge, sweets worth sharp dental pains. My love is like the needle that lights up a junkie's veins. My love is like loud drunks next door. I'm wide awake all night. My love is like a brothel where the price is always right. My love is like a French cookbook that keeps me fat and happy. And I'm like Robert Burns if all his similes were crappy. So I guess we've established by now that I'm not primarily a children's poet, but I do have grandkids, and I am trying to work up some poems inspired by like fairy tales, nursery rhymes. Let me try out one of those on you. This is Night Sky. I live on the moon in a comfortable house. I sleep in a comfortable bed. But one thing I never find comfy one bit is a cow jumping over my head. The moon is the cheerfulest place you could live and the friendliest place you could visit. But mooing and swooping a path through our sky every night isn't courteous, is it? I totally get it. The party got wild. The spoon and the dish ran away. Natural enough that a frisky young calf would be up for a new way to play. But let's all agree it's gone on long enough. Night after night, the same leap, the same horns and hooves flying by overhead, disturbing a moon dweller's sleep. If the cow wants to jump now and then, that's okay. Every creature deserves a good lark, but spare us some nights with our sky undisturbed, just earth glow, the stars, and the dark. So please, if your family has a pet cow, or you plan to acquire one soon, no matter what else you may train it to do, teach it not to jump over the moon. And this one is inspired by a well-known children's story. You can tell me if this versified version you think would work for children. This is Three Bears. We are such decorous, well-mannered bears, not savage hunters red in tooth and claw. We sleep in beds and sit upright in chairs. The food that we prefer is cooked, not raw. Our domicile, far from a feral den, is a quaint cottage, tidy, well-nigh twee. Tamely adapted to the ways of men, we are the harmless ursine bourgeoisie. We do not let our well-reared cub run wild. He'd scorn to be a burglar or a vandal. We're shocked to find our homes been thus defiled. The pilferage, the breakage, it's a scandal. We're cuddlier than Paddington and Pooh. Our dispositions couldn't be much sweeter, but this blonde girl's behavior just won't do. As soon as she wakes up, let's kill and eat her. That would work for kids, right? Kids are into the grisly stuff. They would like that. This next poem is definitely not a children's poem, but it is a sequel to a well-known children's poem. I can still remember my mother's voice when we were young, reading to us from Edward Lear's The Owl and the Pussycat. They sailed away for a year and a day to the land where the bong tree grows, and there in the wood a piggy-wig stood with a ring at the end of his nose. And you know how the story goes from there. They buy the ring, they get married by the turkey who lives on the hill, they eat their wedding feast with a runcible spoon, and hand in hand on the edge of the sand they dance by the light of the moon. It's great stuff. This is my sequel to that. This is Owl and Pussycat Honeymoon. Our courtship was fun. Now the wedding is done, and we've issues we need to discuss, said the pussy. Coition, in any position, is a knotty dilemma for us. Never mind procreation, just plain recreation involving a cat and a bird looks to be heavy weather. Between fur and feather, Congress must, alas, prove absurd. My sweet wife, the owl said, our marital bed is a place we have no need to fear. We were made for romance. We are creatures of fancy. How pleasant to know Mr. Lear. How do you suppose that a ring from the nose of a piggy fits snug on your paw? Nonsensical verse can make better from worse. We are not bound by natural law. We can dance hand in hand on the edge of the sand, though of hands we are neither possessed. I strum my guitar Croon how lovely you are, and the muses take care of the rest. Details of anatomy simply don't matter. We transcend such stuff. We belong to a realm whose carnality scoffs at reality. Come, inhale from this tree. It's a bong. Now, I think that I have something in common with a number of other poets who are here today. Having heard some of my verses, you may be offended to hear that, but I think it's true. There is some common ground. Show of hands, I personally have never won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Anybody else in that same boat? I think there might be one or two. This is a poem about somebody who did. Blowin' in the Swedish Wind. How many times must a folk song be heard before it can pass for a hymn? How many crowns can a busker's hat hold before it is filled to the brim? How many trophies might brighten a stage before all the lights will go dim? The answer, my friend, is more than I can tell. It's more than Al Nobel and I can tell. How many times must professors square off to fight out the art of a song? How many who are not Christopher Ricks are bound to get everything wrong? How many essays must mumble and drone till we know they have gone on too long? The answer, my friend, is more than I can tell. It's more than I can tell with my Nobel. Now, having done a Bob Dylan poem, I believe that I am required by law to follow up with a Beatles poem. So this is a Beatles song reimagined as a sonnet, Norwegian Wood Sonnet. This is the story of a girl I had, or else a tale of how that girl had me. She took me to her bachelorette pad. I found it decorated Nordically. She offered me a drink, she offered me a seat and poured some wine. There were no chairs. I plopped down on the floor to drink and chat and hope she'd soon be mine. But this, alas, was not my night to score. At 2 a.m., she said, it's time for bed, but not for sex. She chose to sleep alone. Off to her bath I slunk to lay my head. Next morning, when I woke, this bird had flown. I torched her flat. The flames that I ignited were hot like me, but not so unrequited. Just an innocent little rock and roll lyric. Now, I know that some of you are aware, as Alfred mentioned, that in addition to being a poet, I've also worked professionally as an actor and a stand-up comic. So I have multiple ways of not making a living. This poem arises from the theatrical aspect of my life. This might be a sonnet about one of Shakespeare's great tragedies, or it might just be a poem about how actors are kind of weird. Scottish play. Good luck, according to backstage tradition, would bring us bad luck. What we say instead is break a leg. Still graver superstition attends the tragedy we love to dread. We swap tales of a curse that haunts the play, of casts bewitched with broken legs and worse. Rehearsing other shows, we never say lines from that one. Our fear, in a perverse amalgam with our pride, says we're so good at being so bad. We might brew up real charms, might rouse powers able, like some upstart wood, to move against us, wreaking untold harms. We'd hold the mirror up to hell and death if we but spoke the play's name. So we don't. Now, when I write about theater, I'm dealing in a realm of creative endeavor in which I have some personal experience and might even know what I am talking about. When I write about visual art, I am dealing in a realm where I have no talent whatsoever. So let's see how that works out. Southwest Limerick. In New Mexico, Georgia O'Keeffe found dry bones, stark sun, and relief from the Freudian gang with their thing for her fang and their eyes on her floral motif. And a very different kind of artist, so a different kind of poem, the Warhol look. Though in Playboy, Marilyn dresses only in her skin, she's a new commodity, silk screened at your factory, clad in garish shades of ink, blonde babe yellow, nipple pink. You can fiddle with her hues, have her any way you choose. Mass production is your game, 15 minutes worth of fame. All your icons look the same. Call them by a single name. Jackie, Jackie, Mao, Mao, Mao. Andy, Andy, wow, wow, wow. Now, Rudyard Kipling's poem, If, has been much parodied. So I am jumping into a crowded swimming pool here. You know the poem. A Victorian father advises his son on how to be a real man in this wicked world. Well, I've reimagined that poem as advice not to a son, but to a daughter. This is If Girl. If you can keep your wit and charm at double the quantity you see himself display, and stifle your chagrin when he can't trouble to listen to those girlish things you say. If you can cook a lavish gourmet dinner, then nibble it to keep your figure slim. If, whether he is playing saint or sinner, your home is always paradise for him. If you can be both Duchess and sex bunny, serene and gracious, yet va-va-va-voomy. If you can laugh when his jokes aren't that funny, and never let him sense when you feel gloomy. If you don't pester him with your opinion, but practice siren wiles to lure and haunt him. If you are less a partner than a minion, he's yours for life. On those terms, do you want him? And here's another canonical poem that I'm sure everybody here is familiar with. Lewis Carroll's You Are Old, Father William. That poem was itself a parody of an earlier serious didactic poem about good advice for good living. And in Lewis Carroll's version, the young man asks for and receives nonsensical advice from the older man. In my version, the young man presumes to give advice to the old guy. This is Father Willie. You are old, Father Willie. I'd like to propose that you find a new way to keep fit. A yoga headstand's an undignified pose. You should not be indulging in it. That girl on your arm, she's a gold-digging tart. Her age is of yours a mere fraction. Pray think with your head, not with some other part that needs blue pills to keep it in action. In the 60s, you smoked an abundance of weed. Your parties were all psychedelic. A respectable pint should be all that you need for a buzz now, you bong-sucking relic. You wheeze when you toke, and you creak when you dance. When you act as if you were still young, you invite those who are to regard you askance. You can't swing as you formerly swung. Now, we are in April, which is National Poetry Month in the United States, and also the month that marks the start of the baseball season. So this is a poem that I wrote about a year ago after Major League Baseball announced that it was going to remove marijuana from its list of banned substances. This is Toke Me Out to the Ball Game. The outlook was like brilliant for the Weedville Nine that day. They vaped some prime sativa, ergo ultra psyched to play. When Weedville got the munchies, there was never any doubt that vendors stocking Cracker Jack and peanuts would run out. They ditched the anthem for a mellow dose of Grateful Dead. The game was not a contest, but a work of art instead. The physics of the knuckleball for once made perfect sense, and home runs grokked the happy math of arcs above the fence. A runner with a lead off first could slide through hyperspace to wormhole past the tag and wind up safe at second base. With Bolshoi ballet grace, the infield turned its double plays, while journeyman outfielders were reborn as Willie Mays. The talent was all Golden Glove, Cy Young, and Triple Crown, so everybody got their ticket punched for Cooperstown. The mojo of the game enacted cosmic majesty as baseball truth converged and merged with baseball fantasy. The players all flew higher than a patriotic eagle in celebration of the news that cannabis was legal. And speaking of flying, I'm sure all of you have noticed that the human species evolved without wings, and yet we have figured out how to fly. I love that about us. I hate being on an airplane or even just at an airport. The whole vibe is just so off-putting, but I love the know-how. So this is Brothers Wright. Hail Wilbur, hail, hail Orville, the Wrights got it right. They learned how to steer, and our species took flight. Now the portliest wight is a wind-wafted sprite who can soar like a kite to a fabulous height. We can't blame the Wrights for the Geist of the Zeit, for in-flight cuisine that is unfit to bite, for seating that packs us sardinishly tight, or detritus heaped up by the hijacker's spite. Those brothers from Dayton we cannot indict for slights at the airport security site, where uniformed personnel seem to delight in pat-downs that strike us as quite impolite. Air travel today is a nightmarish rite, but those two are in no wise at fault for our plight, which is why I cry hail, which is why I invite you to join me in hailing the Wrights got flight right. Well, I would like to finish with a poem that thanks you all for being such a good audience in a weird way. Thank you for being a good poetry audience. I am going to finish with an anti-poetry poem. This is Verses Against Verses, or if you prefer, Verses, Verses, Verses. Every I am, every trochee, every anapestic joke he tries to tell is more annoying than the last one. With each spondee, with each dactyl, she seems flaky as a fractal. Are they stoned or drunk or trying to pull a fast one? When their measures wax erotic, they look weirdly unexotic. All those rhymes and rhythms they keep having fun with may be just benignly strange or may pose some grave moral danger. So beware the foolish straw their gold is spun with. Some are beat and some romantic. All their egos are gigantic. Keep your distance when they try to draw you close. Their metaphors are snares that will catch you unawares, and their similes are like a fatal dose. Some are living, some are dead. Some are Sylvia and Ted, and you wouldn't want to drink with them or date them. The way they play with words, like a chef with dead, plucked birds, makes you wonder why God bothered to create them. Thank you very much. My book is The Joke's on Me, and if you buy a copy, the joke's on you.
Oh, God, you are tremendous. I pray that I never have to follow you at a poetry reading. Well, thanks to our audience as well. Thanks to Midge. The two of you could not possibly have been more entertaining. And I hope that, well, you know, we have quite a presentation that to follow this. So they don't have to pray and pray and pray that they don't have to follow you, because it's going to be something truly special. I urge you to tune in to hear Natasha Trethewey, who is going to receive our first annual XJ Kennedy Award, and she's going to read, and then following her reading, she's going to engage in conversation with our local legend, Rena Espaillat. I think getting those two on the screen together is, I think that's one of my greatest achievements. This is going to be a wonderful thing. So please, I'm going to end this I'm going to end the program now, and goodbye to all of you, and see you soon, I hope.